Brethren, the presentation that I've taken from Solomon today is Symbols of the First Degree, which is a presentation relating to the first degree ceremony, and especially to those parts of the ceremony that have a symbolic meaning and significance. Symbols of the First Degree. Thomas Carlyle, who lived from 1795 to 1881, the noted Scottish historian, mathematician and novelist, wrote, "By symbols, accordingly, is man guided and commanded, made happy, made wretched. He everywhere finds himself encompassed with symbols, recognized as such, or not recognized. The universe is but one vast symbol of God. Nay, if thou wilt have it, what is man himself but a symbol of God?" And this is taken from the Sartor Resartus, or the Taylor Retailored, written in 1836. The first degree ceremony begins with the candidate, a nervous, apprehensive figure standing dishevelled, ill-shod, and blind before a door which is shut firmly and locked against him. His companion, standing beside him, takes his right wrist and, guiding his right hand to the knocker, tells him to strike the door slowly and deliberately 3 times. The ceremony of initiation has begun. The word initiation comes from the Latin initium, meaning beginning. The word candidate comes from the Latin canditatus, meaning clothed in white, and refers to the custom of people standing for election to office in ancient Rome wearing bleached white togas. The candidate for the first degree of Freemasonry must be a free man, and at least 21 years old. This is because a medieval bondman, serf or slave, was bound to his master and, historically, a boy under 21 years old was tied to his father. If he were not free, or he were under 21, he might be repossessed by his owner, master or father, and made to reveal the secrets of Freemasonry. As an aside, brethren, as we know, these days, a man can be made a Mason at the age of 18 with the proper dispensation. The ceremony is based on trinities, series of 3s, including knocks, steps, lights, columns, tools, secrets, principal officers and assistant officers, a triangular force in each case. There are several explanations for the significance of the 3 knocks, and the one most often quoted in Masonic ritual books is from Jesus Christ's Sermon on the Mount. "Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you." From the book of Matthew, chapter 7, verse 7. Other commentators argue that they allude to the Masonic virtues of faith, hope, and charity. The door of the lodge is of great significance, as its outer side faces the profane world and its inner side the sacred world of the lodge. So when we pass through it, we hope we change for the better and achieve spiritual growth. The candidate who knocks for admission must have faith in God and hope and charity in his heart. The password is the tongue of good report. Now let's look at the physical preparation of the candidate. In some lodges, the candidate is dressed in white pajamas, as white symbolizes innocence and was the color worn in ancient Rome by people standing for election to office. In the ancient world, all metal belonged to the gods of the underworld, so candidates were required to remove any metal buttons or buckles in the 18th century. They were often donated to Masonic charities. The candidate is hoodwinked, so that, in the unlikely event of him leaving before the ceremony is complete, he cannot reveal the details of the interior of the lodge. It also symbolizes his progress from darkness to light. That my heart might conceive before my eyes should discover. It also shows the trust we place in our Masonic brethren, as we have all been through our initiation and have emerged as friends and better people. The candidate's right arm is bared, to show he is fit for manual labour, and that he carries no concealed weapons. In the 18th century and earlier, this was significant as operative masons had to be able to do strenuous manual work, and unfit or disabled masons would be a drain on the lodge's charity fund. It was also an era when most people went out armed in public, so by discarding their arms they were demonstrating their trust. The candidate's left breast is bared, to expose his heart and to make sure he is not a woman. This symbolises him opening his heart to receive instruction. Later in the ceremony, his heart is tried with the points of a poignard and the compasses, symbolising the pain of conscience. The candidate's left knee is bared so that when he kneels on it, his flesh is in contact with the earth, or at least it would be if the kneeling stool were not there. The candidate's right heel is slipshod as evidence of his humility. This also unbalances him, preventing him from running away, and it is also an old Judeo-Christian and Muslim tradition. In the Bible, God speaks to Moses from the burning bush, saying, "Put off thy shoes from thy feet, for the place where thou standest is holy ground." And that's repeated several times in the Bible. Exodus chapter 3 verse 5, Joshua chapter 5 verse 15, and Acts chapter 7 verse 33. In Scottish lodges, this is called the rite of discalation, that proves the candidate's sincerity of intention. Under certain rituals, the candidate stands at the northeast corner and gives his left shoe to the worshipful master as the following verses are read. Now this was the manner in former time in Israel concerning redeeming and concerning changing. For to confirm all things, a man plucked off his shoe and gave it to his neighbour. And this was a testimony in Israel. Therefore the kinsman said unto Boaz, "Buy it for thee." So he drew off his shoe. The book of Ruth, chapter 4, verses 7 to 8. And the brethren are called to witness that he has entered Freemasonry and is ratifying the bargain with the lodge. His shoe is then returned to him. The candidate wears a cable tow around his neck. This not only prevents him from running away, but also reminds him of his mortality. 3,000 years ago, the Zoroastrians believed everyone wore a noose around their neck throughout their lives. At death, it fell away from the righteous, who rose to heaven, but the wicked were dragged by it down to hell. And now we come to the ceremony itself. As the candidate enters the lodge, the inner guard presses the tip of the poignard to his naked left breast. The poignard has a cross hilt, so if it is held with the blade pointing downwards, it forms the Christian emblem of the cross, symbolizing peace. Our operative mason forebearers used a pointed bricklayer's trowel instead of a poignard, and a miniature trowel was the collar jewel of the youngest apprentice, who acted as doorkeeper. This reminds the candidate that he is about to embark on something sacred and solemn, to which entrance is difficult in more than one sense. In the Middle Ages, it was widely believed that evil spirits could impersonate people, but they could be scared away by making the sign of the cross. This was the origin of the practice of a squire spending the night before being knighted in front of an altar at prayer with his sword pointing downwards in front of him to form a cross. The candidate is then instructed to kneel and receive the benefit of prayer, and the deacons cross their wands over his head, forming a triangle, emblematic of fire. They also form an upright fire triangle when he takes his obligation. The Masonic sign of sincerity, used in prayer, is another ancient gesture, where the right hand is placed over the heart with the fingers and thumb parallel to each other. The sign is discharged by dropping. It is never cut. The candidate is then instructed to stand to begin the rite of circumambulation, part of a very old ceremony of several ancient civilizations that follows the daily route of the sun. In the early days, Masonic lodges had a space called the outer path, around the outer edge, along which the candidate would be led to each gate. After his reception, he was allowed onto the floor of the lodge and led around the inner path to show he was properly prepared. This emphasized the role of the wardens in guarding the paths, and only candidates who had passed along both paths were presented to the worshipful master. Today, the junior deacon guides the candidate around the lodge and visits the junior and senior wardens, is passed on free and of good report, and receives the appropriate grip, which should be strong and reassuring. He is then presented to the worshipful master by the senior warden. The junior deacon instructs the candidate in the steps of advancement, each of which carry him further forward than the last, symbolizing his will to go forward and his trust. In old versions of the ritual, the steps were 9, 12, and 15 inches respectively. The candidate takes his obligation with his right hand on the volume of the sacred law, and his left hand holding the compasses open to form a square with one point pressed to his bared left breast, symbolizing his wish that the love of virtue is centered on his heart. The deacons form a triangle with their wands, symbolizing the triangular door of the ancient Egyptian lodge and the second portal through which he has to pass. After sealing his serious and solemn obligation, he is restored to light as the hoodwink is removed with a clap of thunder. Note that the deacon, symbolizing man's higher self, that removes the blindfold. The obligation ends with the candidate swearing to keep the secrets of Masonic ritual, without evasion, equivocation, or mental reservation of any kind, in the knowledge that, on their violation, he would be subject to the symbolic, and it's important to say not actual, penalties associated with the degree. In this case, involving having the throat cut across, thereby severing our upper nature from our lower or base nature. Hopefully we cultivate the former and suppress the latter. Having his tongue torn out by the root would not actually kill you, but would prevent you from pleading your case before the throne of heavenly grace. Being buried in the sand of the sea at low water mark, or a cable-tow's length from the shore, where the tide regularly ebbs and flows twice in 24 hours, refers to the sand of a beach which is neither sea nor dry land, and which cannot be consecrated, thus denying the remains of a wilfully perjured Freemason the possibility of eternal life in heaven. Remember, these penalties sound rather blood-curdling, but they are highly symbolic. The new brother is then placed in the northeast of the lodge, just as the foundation stone of a new building is laid in the northeast corner, the first part of the building to be illuminated by the sun rising each day. The secrets, signs, token, and words of recognition are then communicated. They are drawn from a time when most operative Masons were illiterate and needed a way to prove themselves trustworthy and qualified in their trade. The sign, grip, and words by which we greet each other should not be the whole of Freemasonry, but rather the building of man should be our overflowing passion. All Freemasons, both young and old, should endeavour to advance daily in their Masonic knowledge. For example, by taking advantage of the wide range of learning materials available on Solomon. Brethren, I hope this presentation has at least given you some advancement in your daily knowledge, and I hope that you will seriously contemplate and read articles from Solomon, which are both interesting and highly instructive. Thank you for your attention, and that is the end of this presentation.